welcome to the Everything I Watched at the Cinema World Cup 2023. In each round, I will pick 2 movies out of the hat at random, discuss them, and then decide which one of them I prefer. The preferred movie will move on to the next round, but the loser will be left in the dust. Some of these movies were actually released in 2022, but I watched them in the cinema in 2023. Who is gonna win? I have a feeling, but I can't know for sure. So without further ado, let's get into the World Cup. After Sun. After Sun follows a father and daughter on a holiday in Turkey. Frankie Corio and Paul Mescal have great chemistry in the film, and their relationship is the passage through which we follow the movie. I'm a big Paul Mescal fan, and he really is perfect for this kind of role. But I'm also excited to see what he'll bring to something like Gladiator 2. The slow pacing and melancholic feel of this movie were right up my alley. After Sun will be going up against Gran Turismo. This is a movie that is for the gamers. One customer who was a huge fan of the games loved this movie because he said we could take the ups and downs Jan Mardenborough faces in this movie into our own lives as a lesson to never give up. David Harbour is a standout performance as he plays this former racer who's been given the task to mentor all these gamers. Between this and Saltburn, Archie Medweke has had a big year. He knows this track. He's raced it 1,000 times. But unfortunately for Gran Turismo, there's only going to be one winner here. After Sun just has more depth to it. And even though Gran Turismo has some heart, it's a pretty predictable movie. So After Sun will be going through to the next round. Air. Directed by and starring Ben Affleck, this is a movie about the creation of the Air Jordans. This topic may not have warranted a movie, but Ben Affleck really knows how to structure a story, and that's what makes it work. And if the story in the movie is even close to true, then the gamble on Michael Jordan is kind of crazy. The movie also benefits from some cool 80s tracks. Asteroid City. I watched Asteroid City twice, and after my second watch, I still couldn't determine what I took away from it or how I felt about it. The second watch did clear up some things, but I will not be watching it for a third time. Obviously, the movie looked really clean and nice. It is a Wes Anderson film. But Air just gave me more to latch onto in both the characters and the story, and it will be progressing to the next round. The experts and intellectuals will probably be able to give a better word on Asteroid City, and possibly even a recommendation. Super Mario Bros. Wahoo! This was the second biggest movie of the year, and it really shines when Luigi and Mario are on the screen together. But the movie feels a little safe, as in it's not very daring. But maybe it's okay to just make sure the movie is decently good and not go too crazy with it, because we've seen what can happen. Barbie. This really is a Clash of the Titans. It's one of the few movies on this list I've seen multiple times, and I actually preferred it more the second time around. And much like Mario, this movie does shine when the 2 main characters are on the screen together. Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling were perfectly cast for their roles, and you could see they were trying to make the best out of the movie. Ultimately, Barbie just does a little bit more than Mario. Jack Black's Bowser is great, but it's not enough to elevate the picture to a point which really makes you think. So Mario will be sleeping with the fishes. Evil Dead Rise. This movie is really stylish. It looks really good. It's almost completely set in an apartment building, which also gives it a claustrophobic feel. The horror visuals are really well done, and it's a big part of what makes this movie work so well. There is one sequence that happens through a peephole which is really creative and spooky. For some reason, when a mother is possessed in a movie, it really gets to me, and I feel sorry for this family and what they have to go through. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. This is going to be a tricky one. Into the Spider-Verse was great, and Across the Spider-Verse tries to do a lot more. We get to see different universes this time. I really enjoyed Miles' interactions with his mother in this movie, and just the first half in general, before the action kicks in the second half. I liked what they did with Spider-Man 2099 as well, and I'm sure we'll learn a bit more about him in the second part. The animation looks really great, of course, and I like the Metro booming soundtrack as well. When you put Spider-Man up against Evil Dead Rise, it has to make it through. They are both really cool movies. Evil Dead Rise is a must-watch for horror fans, but Spider-Man is some of the greatest animation you'll ever see. Puss The Last Wish. Another amazing animated film, the long-awaited sequel to Puss in Boots came out earlier this year. Puss is down to his last life, and he's on a journey to find the last wish. We are reunited with old favourites like Kitty Softpaws, and Goldilocks and the Three Bears are a great addition. This movie deals with mature themes really well, in a way that hasn't been seen before in animation. There's also the presence of a great villain who's actually spooky. Transformers: Rise of the Beasts. Surprisingly, I enjoyed some of this movie. I feel like the lead actor and Mirage had some good chemistry. Also, it was nice to see a young, angsty Optimus Prime doing some fighting. Optimus Primal is also a good name for the big gorilla, so the franchise gets some respect for that. But other than that, there's not much more to say about the movie, and it's otherwise pretty forgettable. The box office didn't live up to expectations either. So Puss in Boots will be moving on to the next round. Avatar: The Way of Water. The beginning of this movie is pretty cool. I really enjoyed the first two acts, with the family dynamic and the exploration of this new underwater world. I watched it in 3D with the McDonald's after one of my shifts, and the experience was blissful. But a lot goes on in the third act, and it did give me a bit of a headache. A Haunting in Venice. This is the third installment in Kenneth Branagh's Hercule Poirot series, and it is the best of the three because of the added horror element, which means we're not sure if Poirot is actually going crazy or if there has been a haunting. Michelle Yeoh gives a cool performance as the medium character with a creepy mask. The setting of the movie was also great, with some nice shot selection to stop everything from getting too stale. My issue with these movies though is that as a member of the audience, it's hard to come up with your own conclusion as to who you think did it, because there aren't many obvious clues and Poirot just seems to reveal who's done it by the end of the movie. And even in something like Thanksgiving, which isn't a mystery film, the audience has something to latch onto in the way of clues to try and figure out who they think the killer is. I feel like I prefer that kind of mystery story, and that's one of the reasons why Avatar will be progressing on to the next round. Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. One of the more surprising movies of the year. It looked like it was going to flop, but it ended up bringing in big audiences and having a long life. Even customers who had never heard of the game were coming to watch the movie. All the actors suited their roles pretty nicely, and it ended up being just an enjoyable adventure with some good performances. And it's going to be up against Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Interesting movie, not really sure what was going on or what it was trying to be. We discover a new world in this movie, but when compared with others like Avatar and Dungeons and Dragons, this new world doesn't feel as alive. I was confused by a lot of the choices made, and I think this might be one of my least favourites from this year. Dungeons and Dragons goes through by default. The Blackening. This is a horror comedy with a lot of social commentary. I think it's really made for an American audience, but there were some sequences which really got the whole crowd laughing. Entertaining 90-minute movie. No Hard Feelings. This is a good matchup because I didn't really watch many out-and-out comedy movies this year, and the truth is there just aren't that many being made anymore. This one had the benefit of Jennifer Lawrence star power, and it could give you a bit of a tickle at times. A lot of people who were sitting around me seemed to be enjoying it, so I guess that means it was pretty good. But as far as which one of these two films I preferred, only how I would judge a comedy movie is if I would watch it again, and I might consider doing that with The Blackening. So it moves on to the next round. Suzume. Suzume is a movie that got me in big trouble. I liked the vibe of the movie. Whenever I went into a screen that was playing it, it was always so chill. It really looked great on the big screen. I liked the plot and the style of the movie. Weird things were happening. Although towards the end I did get lost in the big concept and wasn't sure how to interpret the mysteries. But maybe everyone is supposed to have a different understanding. Fast X. I went into this movie with low expectations, and I still didn't manage to enjoy it for some reason. The action is over the top in the movie as expected, and there are some crazy things going on. But I found myself not concentrating on the movie and thinking about other things, and that is a pretty bad place to be. I guess Jason Momoa is the best part of the movie, but I really wish they would have shown a bit more of that race in Brazil. I really can't put Fast X through to the next round, especially not over Suzume. But big news though, Giselle and The Rock are back. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. This was a new take on the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles with a unique animation style. Teenagers were actually playing the turtles, and a lot of what they were doing seemed to be improvised, which was fun. But it also gave the turtles some depth. An important part of the movie for me was Ice Cube's reveal as Superfly, and what he goes on to do with the character. I think this is a great introduction for the next generation of Ninja Turtle fans. Who is your favourite Ninja Turtle? Please feel free to let me know. The Creator. The Creator is a relatively low-budget science fiction action movie. The concept of the movie is something we've seen before, but this one brings some new ideas. The movie also looks great with the future cities and the new technologies. It is impressive how it's done on this budget when so many other films seem to be getting it wrong at the moment. It's just nice to see a movie like this being made, which isn't attached to any franchise or known property. I think where the creator has the beating of the Ninja Turtles is in the heart of the movie, which is the emotional connection between the AI Alfie and our main character. Ninja Turtles also have some relatable themes, but these themes are core to the creator, and they're a big part of what makes the movie work. So the creator will be progressing to the next round. John Wick, Chapter 4. This is the supposed finale to the John Wick saga. I am a fan of the franchise, and this might be one of the best films. We know these movies can be a bit repetitive, but there are a few standout sequences. I liked everything that happened in the hotel in Osaka. There was one long bird's eye view shot of John Wick running through a house with a flamethrower gun. I also enjoyed when he's climbing the steps to Montmartre in Paris. For entertainment value, Kane the Blind Assassin was a good addition, as well as Man with His Dog. John Wick will be up against Talk to Me. Talk to Me was a directorial debut and one of the best horror movies of the year. It had an exciting new premise, which led to some really creepy moments, and a pretty devastating ending. Performances in the movie were also really strong, but as with other horror movies, I felt that the decisions that the characters were making were often suboptimal. Saying that, this is a movie that should definitely be added to the horror rotation, but I don't think it had the impact to beat the grand finale that was John Wick Chapter 4. Are you there, God? It's me, Margaret. I went into this movie completely blind because I heard that it was good. Perhaps that was a bit of a mistake because it wasn't at all what I was expecting. That doesn't mean I didn't like it, but a lot of the themes were lost on me because I couldn't relate so well, and I also felt a bit embarrassed to be in there. However, the analysis of religion from a child's point of view was what made the movie stand out for me. The main actress's performance is really natural as well, and she does a lot of heavy lifting for the movie. Saw X. I love the first Saw film. This one also has a groovy, hard-hitting plot, and you can really understand character motivations. But by like the second trap, I was already done. It made me feel dizzy and nauseous, and I wanted to leave the cinema, but I couldn't because of peer pressure. Thankfully, from this moment onwards, things became a bit more bearable, and I managed to struggle my way through the rest of the movie. If you're a big fan of the Saw franchise, you will love Saw X, but it was a horrible experience for me, so Margaret will be going through. There are some big hitters left in the hat. I sense an upset coming soon. The Menu. So The Menu is another one of those films that came out at the tail end of last year. And from the slick editing and dialogue in the very first scene, you can tell you're going to be watching something uniquely well crafted. Anya Taylor-Joy and Ralph Fiennes are the big hitters in the movie that give strong, darkly comedic performances. The movie wouldn't be what it is without Nicholas Holt's entertainingly frustrating character. The Flash. This is honestly a pretty weak bracket. Despite poor reviews, The Flash isn't the worst movie ever, but it also isn't the greatest. I don't know too much about The Flash as a character, so I was learning during the movie. And the movie does have a lot of heart, and some fun moments. But there are also some poorly done, overwhelming action scenes and visuals in the third act, the kind of thing that we've seen before, and I was just over it. The menu will be going through to the next round. Oppenheimer. Christopher Nolan's latest release. This one went huge. Barbenheimer was unlike anything we've ever seen before, and we might not ever see anything like it again. They said to go and see it in IMAX, but I don't think that was really necessary in enjoying it, because I don't feel like it would have added too much to the picture. The build up to the bomb was cool, but a lot of the best stuff happened after that, in my opinion, with my favourite scene happening in the Oval Office with Harry Truman. The movie has a blaring score throughout, which gives it that feeling of pace and intensity, and you really feel that intensity towards the ends during the interrogation. Killers of the Flower Moon. This is a battle of some long movies. Killers of the Flower Moon is 3.5 hours of drama and death. It is a well-made and well-acted movie. Leonardo DiCaprio is a great actor. But I really couldn't get into this one. Maybe it was the mood I was in when I went to go watch it. I didn't latch onto any of the characters, and I felt an absence of tension when the FBI come to investigate in the third act. And that's really important in this matchup, because in Oppenheimer I felt the exact opposite. When I talk to people who love this film, they speak of elements that I completely missed while watching it. So I'm not really the best spokesperson, because a lot of customers and colleagues did love it. But I do recommend to watch it if you haven't already, because I'd be interested to see if anyone shares the same opinion. But as things stand, in the battle of these longies, Oppenheimer will be going through. Mission Impossible: Dead Reckoning, Part 1. Tom Cruise really knows how to make a movie. The opening sets things off to a great start. I saw it a lot because of screen checks, and it is a fantastically constructed sequence. The big stunt is breathtaking, and I really mean that. You're sitting there wondering if he's gonna die in real life. But the train sequence as a whole is amazing action on screen, and it's a bit of a throwback to those old school action set pieces. Great stuff. Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Second Marvel movie of the year, but they feel quite separate to the rest, because with James Gunn at the wheel, they could just be a regular space adventure movie with a different direction. And that might be a factor in why this one seems to have done quite well and been popular with the fans, when others have struggled so very, very much. It was nice to learn a bit more about Rocket the Raccoon, and have a villain who's actually a detestable character. The movie ends up being a good time and a nice conclusion to the trilogy. The character work in Guardians of the Galaxy definitely trumps Mission Impossible, but nothing in Guardians of the Galaxy, or anything else on this list, had me on the edge of my seat in terms of action like Mission Impossible. And for that reason, Ethan Hunt must make it through to the next round. Last two in the hat. Dumb Money. Dumb Money is a movie about the GameStop saga in early 2020. The movie works best when Roaring Kitty, Robin Hood, or Citadel are on screen. And we got to learn about how exciting and difficult decisions were for these different groups of people as the stock gained more traction over time. And there were also entertaining montages of social media reaction as a response to any big changes in the landscape. Past Lives. Past Lives is an A24 production directed by Celine Song, and it follows two childhood friends over a 2-decade period. The movie addresses many different themes which are conveyed really well by the three lead actors. And once the movie is done, you have a lot left to think about and how it relates to your own life. Without saying too much more, the movie does give Dumb Money a bit of a clobbering, a bit of a thrashing. While Dumb Money can be entertaining, I feel like it spends too much time on characters that have little impact on the story. When comparing it with something like The Big Short, which might be a simplistic or basic comparison, but it's staring you right in the face. In that movie, you also have these different groups of characters, and some may be more interesting than others, but they all have some drive to them, and that really isn't the case with Dumb Money. I would have also liked to have seen the movie go into more of the weeds and details of the actual finances of what was going on. Because from the way the story is portrayed, it feels like this topic didn't really warrant a movie and might have just served better as a documentary. Past Lives storms through to the next round. So as things stand, Here are the established round of 16 brackets. So the first matchup in the round of 16 is After Sun versus Suzume. These movies have very strong themes and they also both delve into the abstract. Maybe Suzume more so than After Sun. And in Suzume, that abstractness, especially towards the end, is where I got a little bit lost in the source. It might be because I'm not familiar with Makoto Shinkai's other work, and you might be able to pick and pull ideas from those movies to better help your understanding of this one. I had a better understanding of the abstractness of the rave scenes in After Sun, which allowed me to see that movie better as a whole. For me, being able to see the whole picture is important, which means it will be a victory for After Sun. The next bracket that I'll be discussing is Air against the Creator. And these are two very different movies at very different scales. But what Air does super well is maintain its story structure. And I felt that was a bit of a letdown in the Creator, especially in its finale, which was at huge scale. But I felt that it was a bit rushed and convenient, which took away from its emotional impact. Also, I would have liked to have seen more of the AI aspect, because it doesn't really have that existentialism like an Ex Machina or a Blade Runner. It's more that AI is just a part of the story rather than a key actor. I feel that further investigation into AI could have been amazing, but as it is at the moment, the movie is just great. Air, on the other hand, knows what it is and does what it does really well and hits every beat along the way. Air will be beating the Creator in this round, but it was close. Next up, we've got John Wick versus Barbie. So I liked some of Barbie, but there were also things that I didn't really enjoy. For example, everything in the corporate world, as well as the idea of becoming a human at the end. I felt it was absent for most of the movie, and when it was thrown in at the end, I felt like it didn't really work. I can't say the same about John Wick, because it does what it does, and nobody does it better at the moment. I'm also a strong believer that John Wick takes Barbie in hand-to-hand combat. So despite me and Margot Robbie being good friends, it's goodbye Barbie, and John Wick makes it on to the next round. So the next matchup we have is Are You There God? It's Me Margaret against Across the Spider-Verse. And there's only gonna be one winner here. As I mentioned before, I really enjoyed the religious aspect of Margaret, but not everything in that movie was for me. Whereas in Across the Spider-Verse, it's all for me, and that's cool. So be on your way, Margaret. Spider-Verse is going through to the next round. Next up, we've got The Menu against Puss in Boots. Puss in Boots, thematically and tonally, hits the mark. But with The Menu, the whole big concept is so bizarre, but the message is pretty straightforward, doesn't have too much depth, and that's what Puss in Boots has a lot of. So I'm going to be sending Puss in Boots through. So next up, we've got Oppenheimer against Avatar: The Way of Water. And these are obviously two movies at a huge scale. As I said, I found the first two acts of Avatar to be magical, but that third act is just so chaotic. And I think that's the differentiating factor, because for me, Oppenheimer really stuck the landing. I will for sure be watching another Avatar movie, but Oppenheimer did a lot this year, and it will be going through. For the next matchup, we have Dungeons and Dragons against Mission Impossible. Both of these movies are quality, and I don't have any issues with either of them. That being said though, there is one that I prefer. While Dungeons and Dragons does have some heart, the thrills never reach the heights of Mission Impossible, so Ethan Hunt will continue his journey to the next round. The Blackening against Past Lives. This bracket hasn't been the strongest in general. Past Lives barely has to get out of second gear to defeat The Blackening, and it hasn't really been tested yet. We'll see who the movie faces in the next round. So that concludes the round of 16. Here is how things are shaping up for the quarterfinals. So quarterfinal number 1 is After Sun against Puss in Boots. And these are two unique movies. They are unique in the way that they are able to effectively address their themes. Puss in Boots 2 levels up from the first Puss in Boots by addressing these mature themes that I've never seen before in a DreamWorks production. But I loved in After Sun how the story was portrayed through a child's point of view. Looking at Sophie's relationship with her father from her side, it reminds you what it was like to be a lot younger. But even though that naivety is there, the film is still able to subtly convey what is actually going on. This is a tough one. I wish I had someone else to talk to about it. So, After Sun or Puss in Boots? What do you think? You know how I feel about it. These are two great movies, but on its day, After Sun is just too strong. So we're gonna have to say, adios, Puss in Boots. Air vs. Oppenheimer is our next matchup. And I feel like it's a pretty interesting one because in some ways these are similar movies. Although obviously in Oppenheimer the stakes are very much higher. In Air, Matt Damon and Viola Davis really fall into their characters, and Sonny Vaccaro is a likable character to latch onto. Their conversation on the phone towards the end of the movie was a real highlight for me. Conversely, in Oppenheimer, it's Cillian Murphy and Robert Downey Jr. who do the heavy lifting. But for these two, it's really what's at stake that allows them to elevate their performances. And I think that sums up this comparison in general. They are both well-made stories, and I learnt a lot from both, but Oppenheimer just has more to it. So Oppenheimer will be going through to the next round, while we say goodbye to Air. Next up, we got the action quarterfinal, which is Mission Impossible against John Wick. These were the two biggest action movies of the year, but they're two very different styles. Mission Impossible is focused more on set pieces and stunts, whereas John Wick, as we know, is that heavy combat style. And honestly, I think this matchup can just be boiled down to which of the two franchises do you prefer? And for me, that would be Mission Impossible, because John Wick movies, especially when they're that long, can become a bit repetitive. So even though John Wick beats Ethan Hunt in a fight, Ethan Hunt will continue on to the semi-finals. Our final quarterfinal is Past Lives against Across the Spider-Verse. Oof. It's tough to find anything between these two movies, but one of them had a lingering impact, and the other just simply did not. Into the Spider-Verse might be considered the best Spider-Man story on screen, and Across has some cool moments and characters as well. 2099 and The Spot. But it's all set up for something bigger, and that does take away from it. I never thought I'd be sending Spider-Man packing, but there's a first time for everything, right? The next installment, Beyond the Spider-Verse, might be able to compete with Past Lives, but for now, Past Lives wins because it's already the full package. So we started off with 32 movies and now we're down to the final 4. Here are the semi-final matchups. Past Lives is back up straight away again as it faces off in the first semi-final against After Sun. And this is a battle of the A24 productions. Both films have a somewhat similar vibe, and the feeling seems to creep up on you slowly towards the end. With After Sun, it feels like you're watching a memory. It has that abstractness and dreaminess about it. For some more than others, After Sun will be an intimate and vivid experience because it feels like you're watching a very personal story, whereas Past Lives is more accessible. It still feels natural, but you know you're watching this decade-spanning story on screen. It's hard to split the difference between these two, but gun to my head, if I had to recommend one of these to a friend, it would be Past Lives. And that's because of the complexities in After Sun, which might make it difficult for someone to understand what to take away from it. So Past Lives will be the first contender in our final. Our second semi-final is Oppenheimer against Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. What Oppenheimer has going for it are the performances and the character stuff. Yeah, it was great to see the bomb in IMAX, but what it was also good for was to see close up the range of emotions on Cillian Murphy's face. And he does a perfect job of telling you exactly where Oppenheimer's mindset is throughout the different stages of the movie. But Mission Impossible has that action and edge of the seatness about it. Oppenheimer doesn't have that action, but it doesn't really need to when it can create impulse and intensity through its score and its dialogue. Mission Impossible doesn't really have much of a character dynamic going for it. And when it tries to, it can end up being a bit goofy. Ethan Hunt has had a respectable run, but there's only so much an action movie like this can do when it comes up against an epic like Oppenheimer. Oppenheimer blows Mission Impossible out of the water and will be coming up against Past Lives in the grand final. So our final matchup is here, Past Lives versus Oppenheimer, and I think sound really highlights the difference between these two movies. Past Lives uses space and silence to let the audience breathe. This is most evident in a long silent tracking shot towards the end of the film that goes on for an extended period of time. And you're thinking, and you're feeling. It's quite the opposite in Oppenheimer, where there's noise and music almost throughout. Can you hear the music? This gives the picture some intensity, especially with the stamping of the feet mixed in. It also does well for the sense of fear when you see the world on fire and the trails of nuclear missiles in the sky. This noise, while crucial, is also part of some of its undoing in this matchup. because the movie can feel so overwhelming, especially when you only give it one watch. There are so many characters to follow, and Nolan's classic non-linearity does you no favours either. I felt this took away from Oppenheimer's guilt and moral quandary in the third act, because we had to spend time dealing with so many other things, like the political fallout. Saying that, the movie could stir emotions at times, but I felt it lacked the punch that I would normally associate with such a catastrophe. Past Lives, on the other hand, excels in its emotional delivery, and that's why it's the 2023 World Cup winner. Yay! Anatomy of a Fall was my highest rated movie, but I didn't include it in the bracket because I've spoken about it already. Sandra Hüller gives an amazing performance as the main actress, and it's perhaps more layered than Greta Lee because we know more about the character. Anatomy of a Fall does have more intricacies in its plot, whereas Past Lives just seems to flow by like a river. So given these factors, it could be argued that Anatomy of a Fall has the beating of Past Lives. But the themes in Past Lives of language, culture, destiny, and kismat speak to me more than those of justice, guilt, and responsibility. So Past Lives will defend its trophy. Take from that what you will. This year in the industry has been full of flops, but there have also been some gems along the way, which have done their jobs in inspiring us. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. I hope there's something you can take away from this video. Please feel free to let me know if there are any controversial decisions that you disagree with. Should Ninja Turtles have made it further? Happy New Year. So coming up very soon, I'll be watching Taika Waititi's Next Goal Wins in cinema. But I'm going to be watching Poor Things as soon as possible as well. So until next time,